This week's episode of our show has been sponsored by the incredible Grim Hollow Player's Guide, which is now available for pre-order.
This book is jam-packed with player options for dark fantasy settings, including 2 new subclasses for every class in Dungeons & Dragons, 6 of which we got to write.
We got the opportunity to write some really cool subclasses for this book, including the Highway Rider Rogue and the Oath of Pestilence Paladin, as well as many other awesome YouTubers like XP to Level 3 and RuneSmith, who also contributed subclasses to this book.
This book is also jam-packed with options for transformations to turn your characters into vampires or werewolves, as well as a blood magic system.
The book is totally compatible with 5th edition and jam-packed with character inspiration ideas for your next game.
So check out the links below to pre-order your copy of the Grim Hollow Player's Guide. And now, onto this week's episode.
Greetings, my name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. Welcome to our channel where we cover everything D&D, including advice for players and guides for DMs.
We upload new videos on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Today, we are talking about how to play a College of Lore Bard in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This is one of the OG Bard subclasses introduced in the Player's Handbook, and it still holds up incredibly well. Even after so many expansion books, new Bard subclasses, it remains one of my favorites for its incredible versatility and all the extra fun that you get to play with a Bard's magical secrets, several levels earlier than other bards get to.
Lore bards are extremely customizable. There's a lot of choices that you have to make along the way, but many different options on how you could build your lore bard. So we're going to take a look at how Monty and myself built a lore bard at various levels from tier 1, 2, 3, and 4, as well as our character creation options. There's a lot to discuss today, so let's get rolling.
So as we dive into the College of Lore Bard, the biggest question on our minds is why would we want to play this class? What roles does it excel at in the party, and what role-playing opportunities does it give us?
I love bards because they are not only a great charisma-based class, they are spellcasters, but they also have a lot of unique features and options. As one of their abilities implies, they are the jack of all trades. And this really comes to life when you play a bard.
In one of our previous videos, Kelly and I identified 7 different roles that player characters can take up in an adventuring party. The frontliner, the beatdown, utility, support, negotiator, explorer, and investigator. How does the lore bard shape up with each of these roles?
Well, when we start off looking at frontliner, I don't think any lore bards are going to be standing toe-to-toe with paladins, fighters, and that sort of mix.
By the same token, I think you would really have to go pretty far with your selections for a lore bard to make them a really good beatdown or frontliner. I think for frontline, I'm going to give them a D. And for the beatdown, a C. You could do better with this with your spell selection, but I really think you're going to be stretching it.
Yeah, I think even if you dedicate your spell selection to being the beatdown, you're still not going to excel as many of the other options out there.
Not at all. But when we come to utility and support, this is where I think the lore bard comes to life.
With the bardic inspiration ability that all bards get, this is already immediately a support and utility option. Yeah. You get to dish out dice to help your teammates out in dire situations.
And the bard has a fantastic spell list with some of the best utility spells and some of the best support spells. Depending on how you want to build your bard, I really think that the lore bard reaches into the upper echelons of the S tier. The only thing that holds them back and perhaps puts them more in the A+ category here is that the lore bard doesn't have anything to augment on top of their spells. They have a great choice of all the spells, but unlike, say, a sorcerer or a wizard who might have options to make their spells even better, the lore bard, not so much.
I think in that case, if we look at utility, I think we should give them an A because they are extremely well-versed at offering utility options with their spell selection. But when it comes to support, I think the addition of bardic inspiration,
as well as cutting words,
yes, that puts them into the S tier for support.
Yeah. When we look at the roles of the explorer, the investigator, and the infiltrator, I think that this is also where it comes down to what spells are you going to choose and how are you going to build your bard. I think that the most challenging thing with the lore bard is I think that you will, based on your spell selection, either be S tier in one of these categories, A tier, or B tier in one of these. It's very easy for your character to double down on, say, a skill proficiency, a feat, and a good spell selection, and propel yourself over into the S tier with one of these categories. But then you're going to have to kind of give up a little bit there. Like, you could see a lore bard who really doubles down on spells like invisibility and pass without trace, and has expertise in stealth and a high dexterity score, and is a really great infiltrator. But then you could take it the other way with a bard that takes like the actor feat and suggestion and really amps these up. And what you're going to realize is that, well, the lore bard can be S tier in any of these. You're not going to be able to be S tier in all of them at the same time.
I do think that there is a case to be made that you could be A tier in 2 of them and B tier in another.
Yeah.
What's great, though, is that the bard won't fall into the C or D tier on any of these.
No, not at all. I think especially with the lore bard, you're going to have enough adaptability there to compensate. You might find that if you're trying to do all of these things at the same time, you quickly run out of spells known.
So I think if we are divvying this up, do we want to give an S or a B, or do we think that it's A's?
I think that by default, it's very hard to not be an S tier negotiator as a bard. I think that almost anyone, if you take expertise in persuasion and take one spell that will help you out in negotiation situations like suggestion or detect thoughts, you're going to be in the top tier of negotiators in the game.
Yeah.
So I think you're in a situation where you'll definitely be an S tier negotiator, and whether or not you are an A in infiltration or exploration is going to depend on your other spell selections.
I think when it comes to role-playing, the bard is one of the most role-playable classes in the entire game.
Absolutely. And I think that it's one of the biggest things with bards, though, is not falling into the trap of thinking that your bard has to be a musician dancing around with a lute. I think with the College of Lore Bard, there's a really interesting opportunity here to make a character that, rather than being a musician, is perhaps a poet or an orator or a writer or a storyteller. I kind of have this idea in my mind of a lore bard inspired by Hunter S. Thompson, who's a gonzo journalist right out of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
There's a lot of famous musicians that a lot of people base their bards on. You could do like David Bowie, Jack Black, Beyonce, Lady Gaga. There's so many famous...
I want to have a Billie Eilish bard.
A Billie Eilish bard, why not? There's like, take your favorite pop star or musician and make your bard based on that.
What about your favorite from RuPaul's Drag Race?
You could definitely, there is an artistry to drag. So I think that if you wanted to take your favorite drag queen and turn them into a bard, 100% that is a performance unto itself.
I think the biggest challenge, I think, with a bard is making the character more of a character and less of a caricature. This is the biggest pitfall with role-playing a bard, is to not let the meme of the bard take over your character's personality. It's really easy to fall into the trap of caricature if you're drawing inspiration from a musician or a drag queen or Johnny Depp in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and end up with a very meme-y sort of character that is a bit unfortunately and ironically one note.
I do think that some of the great examples I've seen in my home games, I've seen a bard that was based on Bob Ross, and I've seen a bard that was based on exotic dancers as well, which also at the time I was like, really, an exotic dancer bard? But it came to life in such magical ways, and like there was a dance and movement to the casting of spells.
Cool.
And just like thinking of little things like that, how does your bard use their art to cast their spells? If you're a Bob Ross bard, you might have a palette of paints with you and a small canvas, and you are painting while casting your spells. There's a lot of ways to play with this idea.
I think, if anything, the College of Lore Bard really allows itself to be open to a polymath sort of character. The type of artist that might have followed in the tradition of what we would think of as the Renaissance man. Someone who is a painter, a musician, a storyteller, a writer that really has a diverse set of skills. And that might be a really cool way to build that appreciation in for that character. You might even draw inspiration from classical Renaissance artists like Leonardo, who was just as much a painter as he was an engineer and inventor.
So when we get into our choices for building our bards, Monty, when you were doing character creation, what did you start with?
So I think the first thing that we have to look at is how we're going to put our ability scores and how we're going to choose our lineage. So starting out for character creation, we want to look at our ability scores and our lineage. I always like considering these things together at the same time because they ultimately are going to inform the ability scores together. And so for me, I went with a half-elf College of Lore Bard because, first of all, I love the charisma boost. I love the floating plus the extra 2 ability score boost as well. And I think for the Lore Bard, getting the extra 2 skill proficiencies kicks skill proficiency into overdrive because your character's going to feel like you're proficient in every skill with this. What about you?
For myself, I went with the halfling, and the reason for that is purely roleplay. I find that the lore of halflings really speaks to this sort of humble artist. They love their poetry, they love their song and dance. They'll be drinking ale while dancing on a table. We all love that scene in Lord of the Rings, and I just think that that really speaks to what I imagine the more humble bard to be.
Cool. And so we did point by for ability scores this time. And so I went with an 8 in my strength.
Same.
I cranked my dexterity with point by all the way to 15 and put one of my +1s from half elf there. I put my second +1 in con and went with a base of 13. So I ended up with 16 dexterity, 14 con, 10 in both my intelligence and wisdom. And I put 15 in my charisma, which then with the +2 makes it 17.
I also used point by. I went a little bit more along the lines of the standard array, though, where I put my 15 into charisma. I had a 14 in dexterity, a 13 in constitution, and then I believe I did a 12 in wisdom, a 10 in intelligence, and an 8 in strength. For my bonuses from being a halfling, I put my +2 into charisma and my +1 into dexterity.
So beyond picking our cantrips, we both did the same choices. We picked Minor Illusion and Vicious Mockery.
They're the go-to options for a bard. You have to have Vicious Mockery in there. It's like the essential cantrip for a bard. Bards are the only ones who get access to it. You got to take it. And I think Minor Illusion just really plays into the feeling of a bard.
And we both ended up with taking the Entertainer background.
Yeah, again, a little cliche. I feel like with a bard, you could go like charlatan. You could go like a charlatan. There's the anthropologist or the archaeologist.
You can do anything with a bard,
The
really.
bards, again, being such a versatile and jack of all trades, you can really go any way. But the entertainer just feels classic. Ironically, we also chose the exact same first level spells. Fairy Fire's in there. You need to have Dissonant Whispers, and then I picked Sleep and Healing Word.
Now, for me, I think of these first level spells, the only one I'm going to keep with this character is Healing Word. I'm probably going to retrain out Sleep pretty early.
Yeah.
Dissonant Whispers has some play for quite a while, but I probably also might switch it out as well as potentially Fairy Fire, because eventually you just get to this point where you're concentrating on something else and there's not much room for Fairy Fire.
I actually think I held on to Fairy Fire the whole time, but I do agree that as we level up, there's more options for your concentration.
Yeah.
So it becomes a harder choice. But Sleep definitely is one of those spells that you pick at this level, but you're going to plan to get rid of it later.
Ultimately, at first level, my character ended up being proficient in 7 skills. So I ended up with Acrobatics, Deception, Investigation, Perception, Performance, and Persuasion, as well as Stealth. And once again, Kelly, you ended up taking almost the same skills, but because you're not a half-elf, you didn't get Investigation and Perception.
I feel like there is this sort of classic vibe that the bard has, and both of us are really playing into that.
So from character creation, we take our characters up to level 4, where we're going to get our 4th level feat, but also finally actually become a College of Lore Bard at level 3, where we're going to get the really good stuff like Cutting Words, where we can now use a reaction to use Bardic Inspiration to give a penalty to an enemy's attack roll, which is amazing.
It's one of the best abilities, and I think that's honestly what makes the Lore Bard stand out to me off the bat. Mm-hmm. Cutting Words is a superb use of Bardic Inspiration.
Yeah, you're going to be using a lot of reactions for this ability, especially at 5th level when your Bardic Inspirations come back on a short rest. Now, also, we do get to choose 3 more skills to be proficient in, and 2 more to be experts in. What did you pick?
So for my 3 new skills, I picked Arcana, Performance, and Sleight of Hand.
Cool.
I'm planning to play this character a little bit on the stealthy side, so I wanted that stealth and sleight of hand so that he can kind of mess around with maybe picking some pockets or dropping things where he needs to. But also I want him to be knowledgeable about the magic of the world. And so Arcana felt like somebody needs to have Arcana. Now, my expertise, I doubled down on the charisma of a bard, and I went with Deception and Persuasion as my expertise.
I did the same thing for my expertise, Deception and Persuasion, but then I picked up Arcana, History, and Insight as my 3 extra skills.
So your character's a little bit more insightful, mine's a little bit more sneaky.
Yeah, I feel like with our skills, I'm going a little bit more onto the investigator explorer. I feel like you're looking a little more infiltration.
Yeah. As we move up to level 4, we also do get our ability score increase or our feat choice. I just rounded up my dexterity and my charisma.
Okay, I actually took telepathic.
All right.
This is going to give me +1 to my charisma, but also give me the ability to communicate telepathically, at least send telepathic messages, and also cast Detect Thoughts without any components once a day and add that to my spells known. I really feel like this is going to give me lots of options for social interactions across the character's lifespan, in particular because I'm also going to pick up Suggestion and Invisibility with my other spells.
You get an additional cantrip at this level as well. So I picked up Mage Hand.
So did I.
Has to be. And then I also grabbed Heat Metal, Suggestion, and Invisibility as my additional spells.
So now we're going to crank our characters up through tier 2 and go all the way to level 10. Along the way, we're going to get one of the big bard features for the lore bard, which is additional magical secrets, which is 2 spells known from any class's spell list. This is a big deal. What did you pick?
I went with Find Familiar and Counterspell.
That's an amazing combo.
They are 2 of the most important spells in the game, and I think that you can never have enough people with Counterspell as an option. Even if you have 1 or 2 people with Counterspell, being able to bring that in just to help defend against spellcasters is really important. Also, I think that bards having a familiar feels really appropriate. I love the little animal companion. It feels really on point, and we all know how useful Find Familiar is. We've done entire videos about it.
This is an absolutely agonizing choice, because 3rd level spells are some of the best spells in the game, and you have a smorgasbord of options as well as cherry picking the best 1st and 2nd level spells from other classes. I labored over whether I wanted to take Revivify, Fireball, whether I wanted to take Counterspell like you did, which I ultimately did. Ended up taking Counterspell and Tasha's Mind Whip myself. And when I get Mind Whip, I'm gonna get rid of Dissonant Whispers, and that's kind of gonna be my go-to like battlefield control kind of 1-2 punch. But I do really think that there's so many things you consider. Like, I've seen people actually make a College of Lore Bard more of a damage dealer by taking Spiritual Weapon and Spirit Guardians. You could even take a cantrip here and pick up Eldritch Blast and Hex. There are so many options, and I really think it's difficult to say what is the best option to take here. If you really want to give some of the other more martially minded bards a run for their money, you could take Shadowblade here and Shield and end up being a better swords bard than a swords bard in many cases.
I definitely was contemplating going with the Spiritual Weapon and Spirit Guardians, but I think that actually would look really good on a swords bard when they get their magical secrets. Yeah. The trick with the lore bard here is that you're going to get these bonus magical secrets.
And I think it's also worth noting when you do choose your magical secrets is you think about the other spells that you're going to be taking just from the bard spell list, because there are amazing spells here as well. It's really tempting to pick up a really amazing battlefield control spell, but bards already get Hypnotic Pattern, they already get Polymorph, they already get Dimension Door. Another one that's worth considering is actually Haste too. Sometimes it's worth even finding out what are the other spells that your party members are going to take, because maybe you do need to take that gap filler spell. Maybe no one else in your party has Revivify, in which case it might be clutch.
We also get more magical secrets at 10th level, so what did you pick for those?
I went with Wall of Force and Fine Greater Steed.
Interesting.
My philosophy is if you can take Wall of Force, take Wall of Force. It just is a warping spell in the effect that it has on gameplay. And Fine Greater Steed It's kind of just to kind of floss on the paladins who have to wait for a bunch more levels to get it, but I can have mine now.
For my 10th level pickup for Magical Secrets, I went with Conjure Woodland Beings and Ivard's Black Tentacles. I really like Ivard's Black Tentacles as a battlefield control spell, again playing on the utility of my character. Being able to tie up a group of enemies is just a lot of fun. But I also really like, with my Find Familiar, there's this sort of animal companion vibe.
Oh, man, yeah.
And so with Conjure Woodland Beings, again, with my halfling, I feel like he was like a gardener in his past life, or he just really was like close with nature. So Conjure Woodland Beings is a phenomenal spell, and also I think speaks to the persona that I'm creating here.
I will say that the new Tasha's summoning spells are all great picks for bards, the ones that they don't already get. And for a 6th level magical secret, Conjure Animals is a good pick too, if you really want to get in on that a little bit earlier. Bards do actually make pretty decent summoners, especially with the lore bard getting the magical secrets earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when we look at our feat choices, because we do get another one on the
Yep.
way up, what did you take?
I did not take a feat. I just took +2 to my charisma score. Bumped that up to 20. Don't look back.
Fair enough. I went with Shadow Touched at this point.
Okay.
So now I'm bumping my charisma up to a 19, and I'm also going to take, well, I get invisibility.
Okay.
And I'm going to take Disguise Self. Now, both of these are already on the Bard spell list, but my reasoning here is that the Lore Bard for me is the most spellcasty of the bards.
Yeah.
And by taking these two spells that I want in my package anyway, it leaves me open to take even more spells. So I'm actually going to drop invisibility from my normal picks because I picked it early. And now I'm going to use that spot to take something a little bit better.
Yeah, for my other spell picks, I am going to retrain out some of those first level spells so that I can get other options in here like Disguise Self. I also will be taking Major Image because I think that it is such an amazing utility but also potentially battlefield control spell. I just love having it in my toolkit as a bard because I never know how I'm going to use it, and it always ends up being a creative solution to an interesting problem. And from there, Polymorph Dimension Door kind of round out the kit.
So with dropping invisibility, I picked up Aid because I think it's a very useful spell. I also grabbed Hypnotic Pattern, Tiny Hut, Polymorph, Raise Dead, Seeming, and Synaptic Static.
Nice. I made sure to also pick up Aid along the way. I picked up Scrying as a bit of an add-on there, and I do have Animate Objects as well.
So now as we move on to top tier play, we're going to level up our characters to 16th level. We get a few more features, and we get more feats and more spells. What features do we gain?
So bards just get the 14th level feature here, which for the College of Lords bard is Peerless Skill. When you make an ability check, you can immediately use your bardic inspiration to boost your skill check result, which is pretty handy, but we got some pretty high skill bonuses already at this level, so it is useful in kind of turning that clutch roll into a success when you need to. Beyond that, though, we're going to get 2 ability score increases, one at level 12, one at level 16. I myself took Inspiring Leader, and then I took Warcaster. I would love to be able to take these earlier, but I really like to get my ability scores up first. So it's a bit of a tough call here. I was tempted by a lot of other feats too, but these were the ones that I settled on.
I almost took Inspiring Leader, but for myself, I ended up going with Actor, which pushes my charisma now to a 20. And also just doubles down on the whole being able to disguise myself, being able to lie my way into almost any situation now with my expertise in deception, plus Disguise Self, plus the Actor feat. I think that package makes a really good infiltration bard. The other feat that I took was Resilient Constitution. This rounds up my Constitution to a 14 and gives me proficiency in those saving throws.
Solid pick. At level 14, the bard also gets to choose more magical secrets from any class spell list. So these can be up to 7th level spells. What did you pick, Kelly?
Well, I grabbed Contingency.
So did I.
My other pick was Finger of Death because not only is it a really brutal spell, but you might get a zombie friend.
I went with Reverse Gravity. I do want to mention that you could also take Simulacrum here. But again, that's going to depend on how far the power level of your campaign goes. If you can take it and your table is comfortable with that level of power, go for it. Because having a clone of yourself is amazing. But otherwise, if we're being a little more conservative, a little more fair, I went with Reverse Gravity. We also get to pick up some 6th, 7th, and 8th level spells along the way to 16th level. What did you choose?
I went with Mass Suggestion, Force Cage, and Glibness.
Great choices.
I feel like with Mass Suggestion, we're just doubling down on, I mean, it's a bard spell. It feels appropriate. With Force Cage, I mean, never leave home without it.
Yep.
And Glibness, again, feels like it's appropriate on the bard. It's just going to make sure that I can now deceive my way in and out of any situation I need to.
I love Glibness. I was really tempted by Feeble Mind as well, but
Same.
ultimately I didn't take any 8th level spells. Like you, I did choose Mass Suggestion and Force Cage, but I also picked up Hero's Feast as well as Teleport. Just because I felt that that gives me lots of extra utility, and I'm going to be able to stack the effects of Aid, Hero's Feast, and Inspiring Leader all on top of one another to really boost the hit points of my entire party. I really think that that's a great package because, while temporary hit points don't stack, Hero's Feast and Aid increase a character's hit point maximum, and because they are effects with different names, they stack. So Aid, Hero's Feast, Inspiring Leader all work together, and I think as a high-level combo, it's just a huge way to boost my entire party's hit points in a really big way.
Can I just say that looking at this, it's funny that when I picked the halfling at the start, I was going with the humble bard. But when we actually look at it, you've gone with this very like explorer, sort of investigator, but also like healer. You're the investigator. You're there to help the party.
I mean, Healing Word is the only healing spell that I actually picked.
I think with what I mean though is like Aid, Hero's
Yeah.
Feast, like that really bolsters the party. You're a party bolsterer and an investigator. I went a little bit more brutal, and I'm like a sneaky liar. So those are the vibes that we have going on here.
Beyond that, when you take things up to the final tier of play, really the biggest choice that you have as your bard is what your 18th level magical secrets is going to be. Bards have some pretty decent spells for their 9th level spell slots, but it really comes down to what you're going to take with your last magical secrets. We both took Wish. Was there another 9th level spell that you wanted to pilfer?
Now, if I was picking another 9th level spell, I mean, when things have to die and they have to die now, I always love grabbing Meteor Swarm.
You kind of went with a little bit of a blaster bard here.
You know, he
Towards
has
higher levels.
Towards
Yeah.
higher levels, I wanted a few spells that I could end combat with.
Yeah.
I already feel like I have so many support and utility options that kind of being able to, oh no, there's a horde of enemies in front of us, oh, they got Meteor Swarmed, or one enemy and I get to Finger of Death them. These feel important to have these in my back pocket.
Yes.
Now, as a 9th level pick, just as we level up our bard, I went with Psychic Scream because it just feels like I get to wail on my lute and scream and pop everybody's heads off.
It's an amazing spell. I went with True Polymorph because if you can be a dragon, you should always choose to be a dragon.
Yeah.
And I want to turn into a dragon. My other magical secrets pick here is going to be Prismatic Wall because I have reverse gravity and Prismatic Wall.
Yeah, we've talked about this in our spell combo video as one of the most devastating combos you can do. Prismatic Wall is an orb above them, and then reverse gravity
into the
it.
ceiling.
Yeah.
So just pick that one up as a fun campaign-ending concerto.
So as we look at this, kind of the builds that we end up having kind of prove the point that these are really jack-of-all-trade characters.
Oh yeah, and I think that the biggest thing in building a bard from level 1 to 20, really, that you find is that bards are adaptable, they are versatile, but it turns out you can't be everything at the same time. And that's the biggest struggle, especially with building a College of Lore bard, is that you can be a bit of a generalist, but you do have to decide what kind of character you want to be overall and what strengths and weaknesses you want to have.
I do think what's important, though, is if you look at both of our picks of feats and spells and magical secrets, what you get is, again, a focus on support, utility, but also I kind of went with the Infiltrator, you kind of went with the Explorer. And like we said, those boost us to, I think that my character is an S-tier Infiltrator. He not only can turn invisible and sneak his way in, but he can lie his way into any situation. Yeah. Whereas you have a lot of tools that you can use for exploration and gaining intel.
Yes, between detect thoughts and having scrying and those tools in there, you can build that up even further if you want to really lean into the investigator role. I went with kind of this smattering of having good support, good utility, good negotiation, good investigation because I wanted those to be my strengths. And then I was okay with kind of the infiltration. You know, for me, if I need to infiltrate, I'll make myself invisible and hope my stealth checks carry me through.
So this has been a look at how to play a lore bard in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Tell us about some of the choices you made with your lore bard in the comments below.
The videos that we create on our channel are made possible thanks to the incredible generosity of our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the work that we do here on YouTube, please consider becoming a patron of our show by following the links in the description below.
And don't forget to check out our live play Shadows of Drakkenheim, which airs Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern on Twitch. You can find all the previous episodes right up over here.
And we have plenty more how to play guides for various other subclasses in D&D 5e right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time
in the dungeon.